No one ever remembered when she arrived. Not the neighbors who had lived on Alderbrook Hill for decades. Not the staff who came and went through the iron gates. Not even the family who owned the house. It was as if the house itself had grown her. Quietly, silently, without explanation. The Hawthorne mansion stood high above the city, wrapped in stone and secrets. Its gates were always closed. Its windows always watching. To the outside world, it was a symbol of wealth, stability, and old money. But inside those walls lived a girl who owned none of those things. Her name was Ava. Ava had lived in that house for as long as she could remember, but she did not belong to it. Not the way the family did. Not the way the portraits did. Not the way the name Hawthorne did. She belonged to the background. Every morning, Ava woke before the sun, not because anyone knocked on her door, but because she had learned that the house expected her to be awake before it came alive. Her room was small, narrow, tucked behind the kitchen like an afterthought. One window, one bed, one wooden chair she never used. She washed her face in cold water, tied her hair back neatly, slipped into soft shoes designed to make no sound. By the time the rest of the house began to stir, Ava had already wiped the counters, swept the kitchen floor, and polished the lower hallway mirrors. She moved carefully, quietly, like someone who knew she was allowed to exist, but only softly. At 12 years old, Ava already understood the unspoken rules. Don't walk too fast. Don't walk too slow. Don't ask questions. Don't look people in the eyes for too long. And above all, don't forget your place. Mrs. Evelyn Hawthorne made sure of that. Mrs. Hawthorne was always perfectly dressed. Pearls at breakfast. Silk even on quiet days. Her heels echoed through the house like a warning. When she spoke to Ava, her voice never rose. It didn't need to. Ava, she would say, without looking at her, the silverware must be polished twice. Guests notice these things. Yes, ma'am. Ava, you miss a corner. Yes, ma'am. Ava, you're standing too close. Yes, ma'am. To Mrs. Hawthorne, Ava was not a child. She was not family. She was not even staff in the traditional sense. She was charity. And charity, Mrs. Hawthorne believed, should never feel comfortable. When visitors came, Ava learned how to disappear. She stood near walls, kept her eyes low, entered rooms only when summoned. This is the girl we took in, Mrs. Hawthorne would say when asked. Her mother worked here briefly, then she left. No one ever asked what happened to the mother, and Ava learned never to ask either. But there was one person in the house who looked at her differently. Arthur Hawthorne, Mr. Hawthorne. He was tall, even as age bent his shoulders slightly. His voice was calm, thoughtful, never sharp. When he walked through the halls, the house seemed to slow down with him. He rarely spoke to Ava, but when he did, he used her name. Ava, he would say, pausing just slightly before it. Make sure the east windows are closed tonight. No insults, no dismissiveness. Just instructions, spoken gently. Those moments stayed with her. She noticed how his eyes followed her when he thought no one was watching, how his expression changed, softened, when she laughed quietly with the kitchen staff, how he sometimes looked like he wanted to say something, and then decided against it. Ava didn't understand why. She only knew that his presence made the house feel less cold. At night, after the family finished dinner, Ava would clear plates she had never eaten from. She would listen to laughter she was never invited into. Sometimes, while washing dishes, she imagined herself sitting at that long dining table, speaking freely, laughing loudly. But imagination was dangerous. Reality was safer. One evening, while polishing the grand staircase, Ava heard voices drifting from the study. Raised voices. That was unusual. Mrs. Hawthorne spoke first. She's getting older. Ava stopped moving. Yes, Mr. Hawthorne replied. I've noticed. A pause followed. The kind of pause that stretches. The kind that feels heavy even from a distance. People are starting to ask questions, Mrs. Hawthorne said quietly. They notice things. Let them, Mr. Hawthorne said. Another pause. Then, she looks more like you every year. Ava's breath caught in her throat. Her fingers tightened around the cloth. Silence followed. Not the peaceful kind. The dangerous kind. Mr. Hawthorne didn't respond. Footsteps moved closer. Ava reacted instantly. Straightened, lowered her head, returned to her work as if nothing had happened. But something had already cracked. That night, Ava lay awake staring at the ceiling of her small room. "She looks more like you." The words echoed in her mind. The next morning, Ava studied her reflection longer than usual. Her skin, her eyes, the curve of her face. She had seen those features before, in the portraits lining the upper hallway. Generations of Hawthorne staring back at her. The thought unsettled her, so she pushed it away. Days passed, then weeks, but everything felt different. Mrs. Hawthorne corrected Ava more sharply now, watched her more closely, sent her away more often. Mr. Hawthorne grew quieter. He spent more time alone in the study, coughed more, ate less. One afternoon, Ava brought him tea and found him standing by the window. He turned slowly. "Thank you, Ava," he said. She nodded, about to leave. "You're growing fast," he added. "Yes, sir." He hesitated. "Are you happy here?" he asked. Ava froze. She knew the answer she was supposed to give. "Yes, sir." He nodded, but his eyes told a different story. That night, Ava dreamed of doors opening, of names being spoken, of a life she didn't recognize. She woke with tears on her face and no memory of why. What Ava did not know, what Noah had told her, was that the truth had been living inside the house the entire time, waiting, silent, patient, and very close to being revealed. The house noticed before anyone said the words. That morning, the Hawthorne mansion woke differently. The clock sounded louder, the floors felt colder, and the silence lingered longer than it should have. Ava sensed at the moment she stepped into the hallway. No footsteps, no distant voices, no sound of Mrs. Hawthorne's heels striking the marble floor, only stillness. She moved cautiously, her soft shoes barely whispering against the tiles. The portraits along the wall seemed to watch her more closely than usual, their painted eyes heavy with something she could not name. In the kitchen, the staff stood gathered, quiet, tense. No one spoke. "Ava," one of the cooks whispered, "go upstairs." Her stomach tightened. She climbed the staircase slowly, every step feeling heavier than the last. When she reached the upper floor, she saw the bedroom door at the end of the hall standing open. Mr. Hawthorne's door. Doctor stood inside. One shook his head gently. Another closed his bag. Mrs. Hawthorne stood near the window, perfectly still. Then she spoke. "That will be all." The words were sharp, final. The doctors left without another sound. Ava stood frozen at the edge of the hallway. She didn't need to be told. Arthur Hawthorne was dead. The man who had watched her quietly. The man who spoke her name gently. The man who never explained, but never ignored. Gone. The house seemed to exhale. The days that followed blurred together. Black clothes arrived. Black cars lined the gates. Black umbrellas opened even though the sky remained clear. The mansion filled with people Ava had never seen before, relatives, business partners, acquaintances who spoke in hushed voices and avoided looking at the staff. Ava moved through them like a ghost. She served tea, collected coats, cleaned rooms that filled and emptied again. No one noticed her tears. At the funeral, she stood at the back, always at the back. She watched as the casket was lowered into the ground, watched as Mrs. Hawthorne stood dry-eyed, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Not a tear fell, but fear flickered across her face. Ava noticed. She noticed many things now. After the funeral, the house changed. Mrs. Hawthorne moved faster, slept less, snapped more often. She watched Ava constantly. "Do not wander," she said one evening. "Do not listen where you are not meant to," she said another. Ava nodded every time, but she listened anyway. Then came the lawyer. He arrived 3 days later. Tall, thin, quiet. He wore a dark suit and carried a briefcase that never left his side. "The reading of the will take place this afternoon," he announced calmly. Ava had already turned to leave when Mrs. Hawthorne's voice cut through the room. "You will stay." Ava stopped. That had never happened before. The study filled slowly. Mrs. Hawthorne sat stiffly in her chair. Relatives whispered among themselves. The lawyer stood near the desk. Ava stood near the wall. Invisible, the lawyer cleared his throat. "To my wife, Evelyn Hawthorne," he began, "I leave the house, the accounts, and all associated assets." Mrs. Hawthorne relaxed slightly, on one condition. Her fingers tightened around the armrest, that the truth be told. The room shifted. Mrs. Hawthorne stood abruptly. "This is unnecessary." The lawyer did not look at her. "To A.M." He paused, then spoke clearly. "To Ava." The name echoed. Every head turned. Ava felt the room tilt. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. The lawyer continued. "To Ava, whom I raised not as a servant, but as my daughter." Silence fell, thick, crushing. Ava couldn't breathe. Mrs. Hawthorne screamed. "That's a lie." The lawyer opened the recorder. Arthur Hawthorne's voice filled the room. Older, weaker, but unmistakable. "I watched my daughter grow up believing she was less." The voice said, "That was my greatest failure." Ava's knees buckled. Her entire life replayed in fragments. The glances, the pauses, the gentleness. The lawyer read on. She was born Ava Hawthorne, kept hidden to protect appearances. Mrs. Hawthorne collapsed into her chair. "She was never the help," the lawyer said quietly. "She was the truth." The final clause was read. "The house, the estate, and everything in it belongs to her." Ava stood frozen. The room erupted, but Ava heard nothing. For the first time in her life, the house felt different. It no longer owned her. She owned it. The room did not recover quickly. Even after the lawyer stopped speaking, even after the last sentence of the will settled into the air, no one moved. The Hawthorne study, once a place of authority and quiet power, felt suddenly exposed, like a stage after the curtain had fallen, revealing everything that had been hidden in the dark. Ava stood exactly where she had been when her name was spoken, near the wall, hands folded, heart racing. The difference was this: she was no longer invisible. Every eye in the room was on her now. Some stared in disbelief, some in confusion, some with resentment so sharp it felt almost physical. Mrs. Hawthorne was the first to speak. "This is absurd," she said, her voice trembling despite her effort to sound composed. "She's a child. She doesn't understand what she's being told." The lawyer closed the folder calmly. "The will is clear," he said, "and legally binding." Ava felt something strange then. Not joy, not triumph. Weight, the weight of a life she had never been allowed to imagine, suddenly placed in her hands. Mrs. Hawthorne stood slowly. "You think you've won," she said, turning toward Ava. "You think a piece of paper changes what you are?" The words struck hard, but Ava didn't flinch. For the first time in her life, she didn't lower her eyes. "I don't know what I am yet," Ava said quietly, "but I know what I was never allowed to be." Silence followed. The lawyer cleared his throat. "There are additional instructions," he said. Mrs. Hawthorne stiffened. "To Ava Hawthorne," he continued, "I leave not only my estate, but my apology." He pressed a button. Arthur Hawthorne's voice filled the room once more. "If you are hearing this," the voice said, "then I am no longer there to protect you from the truth." Ava's breath caught. "I made a choice many years ago," the voice continued. "A cowardly one. I chose comfort over courage, reputation over responsibility." The room remained frozen. "I allowed you to grow up believing you were less, so that others could believe I was more." Tears streamed down Ava's face now. "I do not expect forgiveness," the voice said softly, "but I hope you will build a life louder than my silence." The recording ended. No one spoke. Mrs. Hawthorne sank back into her chair, her authority finally broken. The days that followed were unlike anything Ava had known. The staff watched her differently now, some with warmth, some with uncertainty, some with quiet pride. The house itself seemed to change. Doors opened that had once been locked. Rooms she had only cleaned, she was now invited to sit in. But the strangest change was internal. Ava didn't know how to be Ava Hawthorne. She still woke before dawn, still walked softly, still folded her hands instinctively. Old habits don't disappear overnight. One morning, she found Mrs. Hawthorne standing alone in the dining room. "You could have sent me away," Mrs. Hawthorne said without turning around. Ava considered that. "I could have," she replied, "and you didn't." "No," Ava said. "I won't turn silence into cruelty." Mrs. Hawthorne nodded slowly. That was the last conversation they ever had. Mrs. Hawthorne left the house a week later, quietly. No farewell, no spectacle, just absence. Time passed. Ava enrolled in school under her real name. She learned to speak without asking permission. She learned that softness was not weakness. One evening, months later, Ava stood in the portrait hallway. A new frame had been added, not at the center, not elevated above the rest, just present. A young girl with calm eyes and steady posture. No servant's uniform, no bowed head, just Ava. She walked past the frame and opened the front doors of the mansion. The gate stood wide. For the first time, she stepped outside, not as a help, but as the owner of her own story. And the silence that once erased her